So I'd like to welcome you to the NCRCRD's, not NCRCRD's inaugural webinar, but Purdue University as a host of NCRCRD's inaugural webinar. In case you're in the wrong place from the wrong link, the title of the webinar is Equitable Access to Cooperative Extension Services for Indigenous Communities, Implications for the North Central Region. Although I think it would have implications no matter where you are and what region you're located. We're trying to start conversations here in the North Central region, taking a page from the West and others that have started these conversations. I'm Maria Marshall. I'm a professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics and the director of the NCRCRD, which we have had now for, I think it's like 9 months. So as our sister RRDCs are running, we are running and crawling to be with them as we get the center kind of reinvigorated again here at Purdue after a decade at Michigan State where they did a fantastic job. So kind of trying to keep up with their fantastic job and add some new things. I do want to take some time a moment to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Indigenous people, which Purdue University is built upon. We honor and appreciate the Potawatomi, Delaware, Miami, and Shawnee peoples, who are the original Indigenous caretakers. To talk a little bit about the mission of the NCRCRD, our mission is to build rural communities through cutting-edge research and extension programs and innovative partnerships. And we really hope that this and other webinars that come along the way really get us to really facilitating and enhancing collaborations across the region, and this and many other conversations. And with that, I welcome you all. I deeply apologize for the technical issues. The great thing about technology is it allows us all to be together here today. The bad thing about technology is when it doesn't work, it's really a poo-poo. So with that, on that great note, let me give it over to Michael Wilcox.
Hi, my name is Michael Wilcox. I'm the Associate Director of the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and I'm Program Leader for Purdue Extension's Community Development Program. And I'm very happy that you were all able to join us today. I want to give thanks to Emily and to John Phillips for helping me along the way in my journey of learning more about the Indigenous peoples of the United States. It's been an incredible journey, and the picture that we used in the webinar flyer was of baskets that myself and a colleague were working on up in Turtle Mountain. And I love that picture because the baskets are unfinished. They were started, there was the foundation, but they're not done yet. And there's so much potential in those baskets, but the potential's not yet realized. You can't carry anything in them because they're not finished, but the foundation is there, the backbone is there, and they have the potential to do a lot and have a lot of impact. And so I thought it was a very powerful picture that I took that we can include in our marketing materials today, because I think it speaks to where we're at in the North Central region. We have a foundation, we have people that care about this, and they want to do more, and they want to have even more impact. And it starts with something like this today, being intentional and spending time together and having honest conversations with one another. I'm very happy and honored that we have Katie Hartmann today joining us from Colorado State University. Some of you may have heard her excellent presentation at Falcon, and thank you, John, again for giving leadership to Falcon. It's an incredible experience. If you haven't gone, I highly recommend it. And we also have Aaron Riley joining us today, and probably all of you know Aaron. And so just honored to have Katie and Aaron with us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to introduce Katie. We wanted to start things off the right way. So hopefully you'll all be able to hear this.
Colorado State University acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples.
This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native nations.
We recognize the Indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it.
As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed.
CSU is a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion.
And significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built upon.
This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment.
Thank you for taking that moment to acknowledge. And Katie, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm honored to be part of this inaugural webinar at Purdue and to talk about this important topic. Thanks, Michael, for playing that. I appreciate that's Colorado State University's land acknowledgement, which I will visit again in a moment. Today, I'm going to talk to you about encouraging collaborations between 1862 and 1994 land-grant institutions, specifically from the experiences of extension educators. Again, I'm at CSU in Colorado, so I'm coming to you from the Western region. And so I'd like to tell you just a little bit about our journey into creating better collaborations with our 1994 land-grant institutions in this region. As Michael just shared with you, Colorado State has a land acknowledgement. I prefer to show the video. I think it brings it to life, shows you the peoples and the place that I'm coming from, specifically the homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. So I'm so glad that we got to share that video today. But I know that we are coming together from very different places throughout the country, potentially from all over the country. So I'd like to give everyone a moment just to think about the place that they are coming from and the native lands that, that their land-grant institution was founded upon as well. So today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of what the problem is, why we're not equitably serving all Indigenous communities through extension services. I want to give you a little bit of a context of extension in Indigenous communities. Erin's going to do a lot better than me at doing that, but that'll help frame our discussion in general. Then also the history and context of the Western region, and again, kind of what we've done to begin this process. And then from my own research, the characteristics of successful programs, and then also barriers to successful collaborations that we've seen. And then I'll finish up by talking about some implications and recommendations for systemic change. So what's the problem? Extension is found in almost 100% of US counties, as I'm sure you all know, but only about 10% of Indigenous communities. Given the land-grant mission of equity and access that we've already discussed so far, Extension has a responsibility to provide equitable access to the benefits of the system. Extension programs at 1862 land grants can collaborate with 1994 tribal colleges as one way to achieve this equitable access, and Indigenous communities in general. So just a quick overview of extension in Indigenous communities. Again, Erin's going to talk to you about this as well, but I wanted to give some context. So if extension is happening in Indigenous communities, there's a few ways that it's happening. If it's through an 1862 land grant, one of the ways is through the federally recognized tribal extension program, also known as FERTIP. That's a grant-funded program through the USDA and NIFA. Again, Erin's going to tell you way more about that. 1890 land grants are also eligible for this grant, and then eligibility was just added for 1994 land grants as well. There's 36 sites currently, but this program's been underfunded, systemically and chronically underfunded. Given the best demographic information, census information we know, if FERTIP were to be funded more like traditional extension programs, it would be at about $10 to $12 million, but has only ever been funded at about $3 million. So that leaves a gap in services. And so one of the other ways that 1862 land grants can collaborate with Indigenous communities in 1994 institutions is just through collaboration. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, 1994 land grants have their own extension programs and their own grants for those extension programs, namely the Tribal College Extension Grant. And importantly, I think it's important to highlight that a grant-funded program to provide extension services is very different than the traditional funding model for extension that's based on number of farms, number of people. These grant programs, as I said, are underfunded, but also because they're grants and competitive, that creates competition amongst institutions and for different communities, so that if one community gets an extension program, that means that another one doesn't. So that's a very different competitive model as opposed to the traditional extension funding model. To give you a little bit of history on the Western region of extension and our work in this space. Again, this is at the regional level, so big overarching goals here. Back in 2016, we held a summit between 1862 and 1994 land grants to discuss mutual goals. One of the 6 action items that came out of that meeting was to develop more opportunities for 1994s and 1862s to gather, plan, and coordinate. Then in 2019, the Western Extension Directors Association met. We held a summit to discuss how we could better collaborate with 1994 land grants. We invited some folks from our land grants in our region, as well as 1862 educators that collaborate with Indigenous communities often, to come up with best practices and future action items. In that same year, in collaboration with John Phillips and Falcon, we held a pre-conference meeting that brought together extension educators from all over the country, not just the region, to continue the conversation. And that's how I met you folks. I presented the findings from that conference at Falcon in 2020. None of that is to say that that's the only thing going on. That's what's going on at the regional level. Individual land grant institutions in the region have varying levels of collaboration with their 1994 institutions. And so individual 1862 land grants might be collaborating with an individual 1994. There might be grants involved, shared faculty members, and we're developing in that area as well. Some universities have better relationships with their 1994 institutions. Some are developing, relationships that were perhaps damaged in the past. So there's micro collaborations going on as well, but that's what has been happening in the larger region. Okay, so that gives you a little context of where I'm coming from. I also want to give you a little information about the data that I'm going to be sharing and where that came from as well. So the first way I gathered information about this was from a mixed method study of the Western region. It's a big place, 13 states and 14 Pacific Island territories. So we include Guam and American Samoa, we include Alaska and Hawaii. So it's a very diverse, very large geographic area. The main questions that were asked were, what characteristics enable extension educators and their programs to be successful in their collaborations with Indigenous communities? And then also, what support structures are needed at the institutional and systemic levels to make those collaborations possible? Today, I'm also going to be sharing some more informal, I think feedback might be the wrong word, from meetings that I discussed in the previous slide. We collected a fair amount of data from participants at those meetings beyond just feedback about what they saw as important practices and barriers to this work as well. This is a lot of numbers. I really just want to quickly give you a picture of what's going on in the Western region, an overview of our collaborations. This is from my survey data. So of the 307 total respondents to the survey, 188 had current or past collaborations with Indigenous communities of any kind whatsoever. If you look down all the way at the bottom, that's the important number, only 13 of those 188 had any experience with a 1994 land grant institution. 9 of those 13 were current collaborations, 4 of those were past collaborations, which amounts to less than 7%, I rounded up. So if you remember one of my first slides that said about 10% of Indigenous communities are being served by extension, this is a little bleaker than that. But of course, there are other ways extension is collaborating with Indigenous communities as well. So this shows we have a lot of growth to do. I also had interview respondents that did collaborate with 1994s, and then of course, folks that came to the conferences as well. But this is to show you the work that still needs to be done in this region. So what characteristics make programs successful in these collaborations? I heard about all kinds of different programs, from food sovereignty to 4-H and youth development, obesity and dependency prevention. All kinds of programs can be successful in communities. What's really important is that the programs and the educators center the goals of the communities that they're collaborating with. So that means community first, not educator first, not 1862 land grant institution first, not grant funder requirements first. It really means community first. And so every community, based on their own history, goals, priorities, is going to have different kinds of programs that extension can collaborate with them on. And that's much more important to consider than what the NSF, the latest NSF grant call is for. This is a quote from a conference participant: "Make sure context and content is relevant to our community for both history and future." So that sounds easier than it is, right? How do we figure out what is important to a community and what goals they want to meet? But that's a really important first question before you show up with a fully formed program to implement in a community. In the blue, you see another quote from one of my interview participants. She's talking about colonization and the history of colonizers in general. She says, "As we got a little more enlightened, we would go in and say, 'Hi, I'm from the university and we're here to help.' But we never asked them what they wanted. And so in countries where they finally wised up and said, 'We're from the university, what do you need help with?' that took, a century to get to that point. So hopefully that's where we are now. But very important to consider. Also, an important characteristic is building trusting relationships. These relationships take a lot of time and commitment, from both sides of the collaboration, to build these relationships. I noticed, and I'll get to this in the barriers, one of the barriers to successful collaborations is a distrust of universities and governments in general. That's true in many diverse communities. And so building long-term relationships is really important. Again, based on mutual goals. So not just the goals of the 1862, but the goals of, in this case, 1994 institutions and the Indigenous communities themselves. 2 conference participants had to say, and I kept punctuation and things as true to the participants as I could. So that's why they're worded this way, but they said what makes programs successful is co-creation, trust, and sustainability. They also said collaboration takes time, needs to be prioritized by both collaborators. Another characteristic of successful programs is culturally relevant programming and pedagogy. This has a little bit to do back to the, centering the goals of the community, but this is about your educational programs in general too. So again, it's centered on community interest and culture. Some of the programs that I've seen done in a very culturally relevant and important way is, as I said, food sovereignty, youth and 4-H, water and natural resources, rural health, and community development have all been cited as important issues to Indigenous communities that Extension is partnering on. This is a great example from Frank, not his real name. This great culturally relevant program that Frank was hoping to get a USDA grant for that has a lot of different components that are important. So I want to highlight it and discuss it really quick. Frank says, the USDA grant was showing people above the Arctic Circle how they could take shipping containers and put LED lights and make plants grow 24/7 and have heat come in through solar panels. I look at trying to help tribes figure out how to provide heat, not only for the home, but also for food growing. It was a national grant, so we tied in a tribal college from another state because they have some of the same climatic conditions as we do. I was to go teach the students at the tribal college how to build thermal mass heaters, basically extending the season with heat. So I think this is a great example because Frank's doing a few things here. He's using his expertise and his knowledge of his climatic system, for example, his agricultural system, and applying it to a tribal college in another state that has similar issues, similar climatic conditions, so that they can achieve mutual goals together. He also is including the students at the tribal college and their learning and thinking about how the learning from this USDA grant can help students in their career development too. And one thing I hear from folks at 1862 sometimes is, well, we don't have a 1994 in our state. I don't have one here in Colorado, for example, so I hear that. This is a great example of someone in a state without a tribal college who is reaching across state lines within the region to partner with a tribal college somewhere else. So it is possible and important as long as goals are shared in the process. Okay, on to some barriers. Funding, not a surprise, right, is a major barrier. But in this case, instead of funding, I encourage you to think of it more as prioritization. So when we think of funding, again, think of it more as where the funds go that communicates where priorities are going as well. So some of the major needs are, for example, personnel to facilitate these programs and long-term relationships, funding for projects themselves, and then also funding for professional development opportunities and conferences, joint conferences, so that we can work on building collaboration and relationships together in person or virtually, I guess, in our case now. This is Kent. He's from a state that has traditionally done a great job partnering with their 1994 institutions. And he said, I'm trying to get sabbaticals so faculty down here can go up there and integrate more, as well as even some joint positions. We're still looking at other joint things we can do. This last year, we integrated the 1994 extension agents into our extension conference. While we were there, we talked about collaboration. We asked, how's it going? Where can we build strength? So in this quote, Kent is showing a few really intentional things. He's looking at how he can melt faculty in together, have joint positions, have sabbaticals so faculty can intermingle and pool their expertise, and then also getting folks together and specifically intentionally talking about collaboration and how they can build strength together. Another important barrier here is managing burden and expectations in collaborations. So importantly, the priorities and everything from promotion and tenure structure to teaching load to all kinds of things is very different between 1862 institutions and 1994s in general. You know, for example, a lot of educators at 1994 institutions have a heavy teaching load because of funding issues, maybe way overburdened in their time, and maybe on year-to-year contracts, not have very much research expectation. All of that can be very different and in conflict with the expectations and priorities for an 1862 educator. And so in collaboration, whether it's on a grant and for research, or if it's to educate students or come together for professional development opportunities, it's important to know what each member of the collaboration's expectations and priorities are so that they can be understood from upfront and built upon together. So again, you know, the 1862 can importantly share funding on things like grants, shift the traditional power dynamic so that funding can go through the 1994 institution and they can have control over those funds. 1862s can do the heavy lifting on grants. Often there's more time, more personnel, more manpower to do the heavy lifting on those grants. I've seen it in this region where the 1862, for example, can be the subcontractor on a grant as opposed to a PI, and really provides support for the program as opposed to leadership. So it's an important thing to think about here too. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be an ally? Those are different in these collaborations. And also importantly, think about opportunities for students at the tribal college. So again, a lot of tribal colleges are two-year institutions. Educators have very high teaching loads. Student education is a very big part of what it is to be a tribal college. It is at 1862s too, but we often have much higher research expectations and things like that. So opportunities for students are great. This is a great quote from a survey respondent. They said 1862 institutions need to ask, their capitalized letters, what they can do to help. Tribal college extension professionals know what will and won't work in their communities, and often they are short on resources. The difficulty is when you are approached by an 1862 extension agent with a pre-formed program and they want to, quote, check the native box on. That isn't collaboration. Instead, that adds extra burden to the tribal college extension professionals to help the 1862 achieve their goal. As I'm wrapping up, I'd like to give some recommendations from my participants for creating systemic change. And I've lumped those into people, education, and culture. So how do we create systemic change with people? I think it's important to engage and collaborate. What I mean by that is create, for example, professional networks across campuses and across educators. There's so few folks doing this work, this collaborative work, that it can feel isolating. There's a need for feedback and collegiality. So creating professional networks is really important. Also, there's just a need for personnel. These folks can educate extension and other groups about the needs, work for those funding opportunities, assist with research partnerships, and coordinate across a region or even nationally. This was a conference participant. When asked, what do you need? What would make this possible for you? They said a relations liaison, a regional personnel to oversee partnerships with a tribal college to make sure it is happening. Report to the president, the dean, suggest this. So I suggest this every time I talk about this topic, because this would lighten the burden on individual educators, help them create culturally relevant programs, help build those long-term relationships, create communication channels so that people aren't duplicating efforts, things like that. Really important for these collaborations to be successful. Next, it's important to value this work. What I mean by that is to create pathways for educators to be successful, both at 1862 and 1994 institutions. This has to do with how educators are evaluated, what's prioritized in successful work at both institutions, again, given the different priorities that educators might have. This is Dave. He says, you get the result you incentivize. If you are incentivizing outreach in the community, then you're going to get a lot of that. If you're expecting publications and impact factors, then that's what you're going to get. I've just kind of ignored what the expectation is for my position and hope that I don't get fired. Dave is an 1862 extension educator, very successful with his Indigenous communities. And he does so in his mind, perhaps at the expense of his career. So if we want these collaborations to exist, we need to make it possible for educators to be successful if they are doing this kind of work. Next, education. How do you create a culturally relevant program? Well, Extension can help with that. They can create programs, for example, for 4-H or SNAP education to give to educators to lighten that burden. There's also, of course, professional development opportunities and things like how to create a culturally relevant program, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice training, also US and tribal history, given the specific context of where you're at. So professional development is important This is a conference participant. They said, could 1994's and 1862's extension meet together? It's huge, but can we do a big conference? This would be a great opportunity for not only building those relationships and forming collaborations, but potentially professional development opportunities as well. And lastly, I think it's important to just think about what it might mean to change a culture, an institutional and regional culture for change. This is a survey respondent. They said, increase cultural competence within Extension so that tribal members would be welcomed, valued, and feel seen and comfortable. That doesn't solve the issue that relationships are not built among Extension and Indigenous people in their state, but maybe we need both, transforming our organization internally and building bridges. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. So much information for us to consider. I'd like to open up for questions, but because of the delay early on, I think it would be best if we kept questions in the chat if you wish. We can try to answer those with time left, but invite Erin to provide her presentation.
So I'm really glad to see everybody. I see Wendy, I see Cynthia, I know I saw Kathy Hart, I saw Lupe, Steve Yanni, I see Mark Hamley. That is always awesome. Thumbs up to you guys for being here. So I'm Erin Riley. Those people that I don't know, National Program Leader at NIPA and the 1994 program, the FERTIP program, and the New Beginnings for Tribal Students program are in the portfolio that I serve. I used to teach at a tribal college in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and that is one of the reasons that I started here. So there's been a question if people can get a copy of the slides, Mike. So, or I should ask maybe Dr. Hartmann if that's okay with her. And you can have whatever I've got. You guys are welcome to my stuff. So anyway, is that okay, Michael?
I see Katie's done. Katie, are you cool with that?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool, right on. So I want to introduce Ara if she's here. Ara, are you here? She's our new program specialist.
I'm here, Erin. How are you?
Say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So we're super lucky to get Ara with all the changes we've had at NIFA. And I think that the tribal programs at NIFA have landed very well. So yay. We are located in Kansas City. If you haven't been to the World War I Museum, it's super cool in Kansas City. And I'll talk about this a little bit later as we go along. So I think, you know, it's funny because I looked at this and can you guys see my slides?
Sure can.
A thumbs up. All right, Drew, thank you, Drew. Okay, I got a few thumbs up, good. So this particular slide was the best I could do in terms of figuring out which group this North Central region was working with. And so I saw that Drew's on here from Montana. I think that's kind of cool because overlap is awesome. And so I was just looking at the number of tribal colleges and the number of 1862s and even overlapping with the 1890s that this particular group would encompass, and there's a lot. So I think that is actually pretty cool that Purdue, if they're willing to kind of act as a landing place in terms of information, if they can do it respectfully, that maybe there's a big opportunity here with what Michael is planning on doing. And I know Kathy talked a lot about a lot of the big picture things. And something was brought up today that made me really think kind of deeper, I guess, into what's going on with these relationships. And one of it is, you know, there's usually like a mix of Native and non-Native people that teach at 1994s. And sometimes it's easier for non-Natives to collaborate with the 1862s because of the historical component of lands, of lands within tribal communities and what happened and how 1862s have treated them. And so I wonder if that's something that we all kind of tiptoe around, because that's a hard conversation to have. Whereas someone who is Native, maybe that relationship building is a little bit difficult. I don't know. This is just an idea. I don't know if anybody wants to just talk about this for a second, or if everybody's kind of quiet and wants to just me to shut up, which is possible too. What do you guys think? Or
there's bad blood.
Yeah. Does that
it carries over a little bit, just that reputation. And even if they're doing better, their reputation still leaves them wanting in our eyes. I say our, but you know, from Winnebago, Nebraska, and the Little Creek Tribal College, that's how we feel sometimes.
And so do you think that there is a bit of and Aaron, you just got called out on your research. Do you think there's a bit of this where non-natives have better relationships that work at the tribal colleges with the 1862 than than natives do? What do you think? And I know, Aaron, your bandwidth is not very good, I saw, so I don't know if we can hear you. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Can you rephrase that question for me a second?
Yeah, I just wonder, we were talking about it where the relationship building at 1994's, 1862s, and a conversation we had earlier today where there are, you know, a mix of non-native and native people that work at these schools. And that relationship between 1862s may be different for somebody who's non-native with the 1862 who works at the 94 than somebody who's native that works at the 1994 and community-based working with the 1862s because of historical contexts.
If I could jump in on this is Bob Pierre. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering at North Dakota State University. I was actually an extension agent for 3 years working up here. I've been working with tribal colleges since about 1998, and I actually did a sabbatical at Turtle Mountain Community College and worked with Mark and some of the other folks there. I think it's about building relationships. I think that slide that was out there before about building relationships, you got to do it. The context of going in and saying, we're here to help you, this is what you need to do, man, you might as well just come in with explosives. I mean, it's not going anywhere real positive. We have always started our relationship with the 5 tribal colleges in North Dakota by saying, how can we help you? What do you need? How can we help you get it? Okay. And I would go out, when I was an extension agent, I'd go out and talk to my county extension agent as well as the reservation extension agent and see if we could bring those together with some of the folks at the tribal college overlooking what's happening. So we had proposals for greenhouses as solar heating units, as community gathering sites. You just have to work at it. It's not the kind of typical extension programs you get out there that people just have this thing you can plug in into a local farmer. A farmer on a reservation is a little bit different than one in the mainstream. You've got to understand that with the tribal college system and the historic history of boarding schools, it's a little bit of an uphill battle, and you've got to realize I need to make friends. The non-Indigenous person has to understand that because otherwise it's just colonialization happening all over again. And we don't need to go there. As a country, we don't need to go there.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your insight. I certainly appreciate it. I think, and it's good to see Mark Hamley on the call too. I know that we've had communication. So I just want to go in and just talk a little bit about some of our programs and our funding levels. So the federally recognized tribal extension program, you can see is funded, and this was from 2022, and it stayed the same in this year at 3.2 million. It's kind of been static for a long time. And basically you can kind of see the funding rate in terms of projects. We have 35 current projects as of 2022. And then what I do want to talk about is a survey that we did.
Aaron?
Yeah.
That last slide, would you break it down a little bit more?
Oh, sure. This is just years going from 2008. Whoops, sorry. Going from 2018 to 2020.
I understand, but what I'm saying is what dollar amount is held by 1862s and what dollar amount is held by 1994s? Because I think what you'll see is there's a distorted amount of money that goes to the 1862s and the 1994s don't get big grants.
So who is this talking real quick?
John.
Hey, Don. Okay, so this is the federally recognized tribal extension program, which this particular program is toward, this was just to the 1862s. This particular program is only available to 1862s until the 2018 Farm Bill. The reason that there's not any 1994s in this program is because it was a 4-year, it was run in 2017 and it was a 4-year program. So the RFA has not been released yet. That's why. So this 3.2 million went to the 1862s for FERTIP, okay? I will get to the 1994s here shortly. Does that help, Don?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, yeah, no problem. So we asked the FERTIP agents and we got 14 responses from them, basically how the money, to give us general numbers on what they were supporting. So of 35 projects, the number of K through 12 students that the FERTIP program supported was 11,455 in 1 year. The number of graduate students supported was 71. The number of faculty supported was 148. The number of students, community members, and farmers indirectly was 47,421. The number of other staff supported by the project was 183. The number of community college students supported, this was also be considered the tribal colleges, is 2,504. And the number of undergraduate students supported by the projects was 4,132. So this is actually, if you look at this number, 47,000 people from just FERTIP, this is just one extension program from NIFA, that's a good number. But if we add into, and these are the current FERTIP extension projects, you can take a look at these. Actually, Cherokee Nation is no longer a FERTIP project, but you can take a look at these and see, and we'll send these slides out so you can see them later. So Bay Mills Community College, they have a FERTIP agent. Actually, I think it's Kat Jock. Are you on the call, Kat, today? I know I saw Steve Yanni. You guys want to say hi? Hey. Are you still there? Hi.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, yes, Steve. Always good to see you. So these are some videos. Let's see if they work. I don't know if they're going to work. I just always thought that was such a cute video to see Kat Jock and who is the FERTIP agent at Michigan State University, and to see the Bay Mills Community College doing a lot of programming with Bay Mills, which has been one of the most successful programs that we have seen between a 1862 really take a big cultural change and realize that they do have a big responsibility for the 1994s. It's so funny. We had this video sent to us. It was in an emergency situation, but I always thought that was cute when that little girl, sorry, playing again. I liked it when that little girl, that little girl kind of stuck her tongue out, because I think that one thing that we forget, especially right now, is that concept of play. All right, so let's talk about the 1994 Extension Grant Program. So the 1994 Extension Grant Program, this is the funding from 2008 to 2020. 2021, it has gone up to 8.5 million for congressional appropriations. So the reason the funding rate changes is because we have a program called Special Emphasis that we are not running this year due to COVID issues, but we will take some of that money, and people who are colleges that are doing really well, they can apply for an extra pot of money when needed. So 8.6 or 8.5 right now is the current rate that congressional appropriations is. And the outcomes though of the Tribal Extension 1994 Extension Program, the number of K through 12 students supported by the project to 2,314, number of graduate students supported by the project are 20, number of faculty supported by the project is 19, number of students directly or indirectly benefiting and farmers 12,623, number of other staff supported by the project 38, number of tribal students supported by the project 489, number of undergraduate students supported by the project 397, and this is just out of 14 schools. This is not out of the entire number of 34 projects. So this is just half. So you can kind of think double that, and that's really the number of people that this is affecting. So to kind of give you an idea of the number of people that these programs, that extension programs in particular, affect within tribal communities. So these are just some pictures. And is there anybody here from the College of Menominee Nations? Did anybody hop on? Is anybody there? Nobody? Nobody?
What? Hi.
Wait, who's that?
This is Heidi. I'm just saying I'm here.
Oh,
we're here.
There you are. Okay. How are you?
Good.
Good. So this is Brandon. He's one of our PDs, and we have some pictures that that they sent that we threw in here of one of their gardening projects. So what I really liked about what's going on too, and I liked what College of Menominee Nations doing, is they're doing a lot of phenology projects. So in terms of, I think I was asking Michael kind of what the new extension program at Purdue that they just received this grant for the next 5 years to work with rural extension, and he's really reaching out to the tribal communities. And so I want to discuss, after I'm done talking about this last program, New Beginnings for Tribal Students, a very successful project that we are working on with another college. But first, I want to introduce the New Beginning for Tribal Students program, which is NBTS. This is a $5 million program. And what this does is it is to try to shape land grant institutions so that they can present themselves as being more engaging to tribal students, and that can come through recruitment, retention, scholarships, a lot of different avenues in which they can use this particular pot of funding. This is $5 million annually. Last year, we funded, you can see these are the colleges that received this grant. I think there were a few people signed up for this particular program. And I noticed that there were a couple of people who, I think it was it Callie? Are you on the call? I think you, and then there might be a couple other people that have this particular funding opportunity.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. Hi, great to see you. So they're right now working on this particular program in terms of getting more tribal students into any land grant, 1862s, 1994s, 1890s can apply to this, but make it so that they keep them, not just recruit them. That's just part of this, right? How are they going to stay? How are they going to be successful? How are they going to graduate with a degree, whether it be an AA degree, whether it be a bachelor's degree, whether it be a PhD degree? And then beyond that, where are they going to go after the fact? So Shanna, this is a picture from Shanna from SDSU, and they're working with Sinte Gleska University on this particular program. They received $500,000 last year, and we're pretty excited. I know Shanna, I think she was signed up for this program, but I don't know if she is on. Also, University of Arkansas, they received a New Beginning for Tribal Students program, which we're really excited about. Is there anybody from University of Arkansas on the call? No? Okay, so, and I see Patricia. Patricia, hey, how are you? I would like to see you guys because I don't see you guys enough anymore. So really things to think about with this New Beginnings for Tribal Students, with the FERTIP, with the 1994 extension program, is how does everybody work together. And I think we already talked a little bit about some of the problems, right? We all know that there's a lot of problems, but I think it's overcoming those problems. And there's relationship issues, there's just a lot of social issues to get through. One of the things that have been very successful for us has been working with a university system. So when I think about working with, like right now, we're doing a project with University of Nevada, and it's able to reach out in different ways that as a federal government, we cannot. So thinking about that and what Purdue looks like, I think what here on the call, I'm hoping is that Purdue is willing to take input on what you as extension agents from 1994s, from 1862s, from New Beginnings for Tribal Students, program directors, what do you expect from Purdue, right? Like if they're building this program that's gonna reach out to you all, what do you want that to look like? A little bit easier to get on the Zoom call. I'm gonna put that out there as number one. Just kidding, of course. We figured it out after a little bit, but anyway, so just thinking about those sort of things is like, how do we make it easy? And I kind of joke about it, but it's true. Like I know you guys as 1994s have so much going on that to re-register, to be honest with you, I just wouldn't show up. I'd be like, I'm done. I've got other stuff I got to do. I got to get lunch right now, especially. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be on the call. So it might seem small, but it's huge. You know, you lose that number of people. So, I mean, there were 114 people signed up for this and only half showed up. So we lost half people. And how many of those were because, you know, just thinking, let's make things easy. Let's streamline it, make it simple, so that people don't get turned away. And I'm not criticizing anybody because we mess up all the time. So dates to remember. What I want you all, and I think you've received this in our emails, we have a tribal consultation March 9th and March 11th. March 9th and March 11th. And there are going to be two things that they're going to discuss. One is racial equity. If anybody has heard, there's an executive order that they overturned, an executive order from the last administration, and Biden has overturned it. And they're doing a tribal consultation the 9th and 11th in regards to this, to racial equity within the United States government. And so I recommend everybody to, if you have tribal members that want to be on this call, whoever would like to be on the call is welcome to be on the call. The other one is they're going to discuss tribal consultations. So that's one thing for you all to please share. And I've sent it out to my listserv. So if you want any information on that, I'm happy to help you. Next one is October 2021. Falcon is going to be in Kansas City. And you know, John, do you want to mention anything about that? You're hanging on here and I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. The dates are October 21 through 24. And we are going to try to make it happen at all possible. I had a call earlier today. We're going to try to make it in person. We might do a hybrid, but we're going to do everything we can to make it happen. And this is the first time it's going to be a FERTIP 1994 NIFA get together. So we're super excited about that.
And can I be bold to invite the New Beginnings for Tribal Students program directors? Would that be okay, John?
Absolutely, more the merrier.
Yeah, I know we have a few on here, and the reason is because, you know, I think that network is such a powerful one, and I have been so jazzed to meet the New Beginnings for Tribal Students project directors like Shanna and Callie, and you know, there's a young lady from Alaska who just is jazzed about, you know, really, and I think there's a huge bridge in this program. And then the other thing is when I talk about another in 1862 that's really making some, I think really creating some neat things is the University of Nevada, Reno, and Maureen's on here, and she hosts a call every Friday through a NIFA funded project called Native Water on Arid Lands. And everybody's welcome to join that if they want to, if you haven't already seen it. I don't know if Maureen, you want to say just something real quick about it, and then I will turn it over. I know I've taken up too much time already. Is Maureen there? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry. I will be happy to put a link in. As Erin mentioned, we have an ongoing group that is mostly tribal extension folks throughout the entire country that are working on issues that spun out of COVID, but aren't just COVID related. So they're COVID and food sovereignty, and we're trying to really build partnerships and synergies and break down barriers for everybody working in Indian country across the country on these topics. So I will put in the chat box the link for that. And if you are interested in joining us, many of you are already on our list, but if you're interested in joining us, I'll put an email in and you're welcome to join us Fridays, 11 to 12 Pacific time on Zoom. Thanks.
Yeah, so reach out if you have any questions for me. And I thank you, even though I say things about I'm sorry, I appreciate the invitation, even though I say things about the invitation.
Thanks, Erin. I think we need to be willing to hear everyone and lift everyone up and be present. And I think that we have thus far. I did want to thank Maureen and Erin. Erin invited me to join Maureen's calls, and I've been trying to join every Friday that I possibly can. And I've learned a lot from joining those calls. And I'm happy that the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development is represented on those calls. I did add an article on land grab. It had been shared with me about a month and a half ago. It is, if you haven't read it, it's very much worth reading. As a Cornellian, I was shocked to see how my university was a part of that. And I see that my alma mater has responded in many different ways. And I'm hopeful that the other universities will respond as well. Thank you, John, for lifting up Falcon in October. That's a road trip that Marie and I will look forward to taking. And I hope that we can meet face to face. I did want to lift up someone as well, and then we need to run to our breakout rooms, but I wanted to lift up Steve Yanni. I had a particular experience over the summer. He was probably ready to call the police. I was up in the UP visiting, and it hadn't even been announced yet that Purdue was going to be hosting the center. And I made a beeline to Bay Mills because I wanted to see it, and I wanted to just see if I could meet anybody. And it was in the midst of hardcore COVID and everything was on lockdown, and Steve was there. And they let me in. I was dressed like I was on vacation. I looked like a tourist from who knows where. And I appreciated the fact that he was open to talking to this crazy person from Indiana who was interested in learning more about Bay Mills. And they handed me a whole bunch of material to learn more about the college. And I've been talking to Emily about this since the beginning, and the NCRCRD, the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, had already started making inroads in developing relationships with the 1994s. And Marie and I want to honor that. And we're excited about all the inroads that they've made, especially in their own backyard in Michigan, but we want to continue that work and further enhance it and broaden it and make sure that every single state in the North Central region is included. And that includes our two 1890s as well. We have 20 1994s in our region. We have two 1890s and 12 1862s. And I think if you've seen our new website, you've seen that we've chosen to lift up all land grants and not differentiate by 1994, 1862, and 1890. But rather lift up all of our land grant institutions by state on the new NCRCRD website. That's just the beginnings of us trying to develop that trust and those relationships that are going to be so important moving forward.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry we took you 5-6 minutes over. I hope that you found all the information we got today as informative as I did. And that you enjoyed doing the Jamboard and got some really good info that we can then report back to you in whichever way about what we can do in the North Central region and beyond to continue to build relationships across land grants, across states, across faculty, extension, research, and teaching, and all of those things that we kind of have to bridge to deal with problems. And with that, I want to again thank you, and we hope that our next webinar you'll be able to just register once and not more times. But oh ye of faith and perseverance that you got into the webinar. And with that, thank you again very much.